Smart Cities Week 2015. This is Carol Stimmel. I'm in the studio today talking to Ken Durand, who's the head of innovation at the Atlanta Idea Factory, which is part of Ericsson. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's wonderful.
We talk a lot about infrastructure in the city, transportation systems, making things more livable, especially on a day-to-day basis. And I think you're doing some things that are a little bit different, especially around water quality, but not necessarily in the city itself.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Idea Factory itself, because that sounds pretty intriguing, and then the projects you're working on?
Absolutely. So Ericsson has a long history of looking at sustainability issues in wherever they occur. And of course, a lot of that now we look at in the city's context, and the things that impact the city or impact livability and sustainability for the citizenry. So we, at the Idea Factory, we've been focused a lot on smart cities efforts throughout the year, whether they be around water or traffic or automotive or video management, public safety. There's a lot of different areas that we get into, but one of the key projects we've been working on this year has been around the water space and looking at source drinking water. So in the Atlanta market, people that are familiar with that will know of the Chattahoochee River, which is the major drinking water source for about 5 million people in northern Georgia. And it's 450 miles of river with 70 monitoring stations today. And those monitoring stations are all manual. It's volunteers collecting data samples in little bags and shipping them off to a lab to see what happened. And then 2 days later, when they get the lab results, as you can imagine, the river has already flowed quite a bit. So the impact of what they were seeing there, unless it's an ongoing problem, is very minimal, or what they can see. So it's been an interesting project, and we've been bringing wireless technologies into that space and saying, can we look at this data on a perpetual basis, day to day, and find out the types of information we need to know about water quality in real time, so that if there's a sewage leak, or if there is some sort of industrial accident, or if there's a stormwater runoff problem, all of those can be monitored in real time, and then that data can be reflected back to the Riverkeeper organization who we're working with, so that they can go out and then they know where on the 450-mile river to look for problems. Okay,
so that's pretty interesting. So Ericsson and the Idea Factory is really looking at the whole value stream of impacts on the city. So just not sensors in the city, but the resources literally flowing into our glasses. And in terms of sensing the data, collecting the data, storing it, analyzing it, where are you functioning along that value chain? Are you actually doing the analysis as well?
No, we usually let the customer we're working with be more in tune with the analysis, because that's not our area of expertise. Now, we can certainly, in the automated sense, set up data analytics in the background to look at certain parameters and then push those alerts and information out to our customers. So you can do that. But in terms of having the bottom line expertise to know exactly what's happening and how to approach it, that's really more of the customer to do. But it is an interesting point that you make, that we are working outside that central city mechanism, because if you really think about it, what is the city? It's really the conglomeration of its citizens, right? And all the things that could impact the citizenry is really what you're trying to do to make the situation more livable for everybody concerned. And even though we've been involved in lots of projects around the world, you may be familiar with our UN Habitat project that we've been doing in Kenya for water quality. It's very important there. But we looked at it and say, well, what can we do from that and bring it into the United States? What types of problems are we seeing that are very different from what they're seeing in Africa, but they are still very, very important to the citizens in our cities as well.
Well, you put your finger on something that I found fascinating for a long time, which is energy and what you're pointing out, water systems in the developing world, solving those problems, even with some military applications like remote microgrids, and taking that technology from surprising places and bringing it back to the developed world so that we can also find advantage from that. So as a team, as a group that's worked internationally, what are some of the important things that you're seeing happen that in different contexts, that are surprising contexts, that we can use in other parts of the world?
That's an interesting question. I think that a lot of it has to do with when you're working a lot in the lesser developed world, let's say, you have to be very, very cost conscious of what can really be afforded and how that values. And sometimes the parameters of what you may find in those situations are a little bit different. Like, so for example, in the topic we were talking about a second ago, the major problem may be in Africa that theft of water. Well, that may not be quite as big of a problem here, but the way in which you monitor theft or monitor water usage is very similar to the way you would want to monitor water usage here. And some of those low-cost mechanisms using these types of networking tools that we have that can bring that together can be easily deployed here as well. I recently was talking with a friend of mine in the U.S. Geological Survey, was talking about the fact that there's less than 20% of the river water in the United States is ever monitored at all. Well, when you start thinking about that, there's a huge span of need out there for monitoring and understanding what's going on, because rivers and other areas are the lifebloods of what make it sustainable for us to live in these areas.
When I think about Ericsson, I think about a company that has always led with human-centric, for lack of a better term, design thinking, but always putting the human first. And
that's right.
That's just what you're talking about, is we have a sensor, we can monitor something, but depending on the context, we may be looking for different kinds of information or using the information we've gathered very differently.
Yes.
So that gives you an efficiency of scale too with existing technologies, and just leveraging them in new and innovative ways.
Exactly, and I think that what you allow then is you allow us to, because Ericsson is a global company operating in 180 plus countries around the world, that gives us the opportunity to scale things in a much different way than if we were just a niche player in a very small market. This gives us the ability to think much more broadly. And you're right, we do very much citizen-led thinking. And the way I like to put that is, what's good for the people is actually going to be good for business.
That's right.
So if we think about how do we build more sustainable environments and more sustainable cities for the citizens that actually live there, that will ultimately be good for business as we grow this out.
So you're talking about the impact of livability on the ultimate economic vitality of an urban environment. Yes. So I'm often very curious about a personal vision, people who work in smart cities and have been working in it for a while on the kinds of projects you're talking about. What is your timeline? Do you think we're going to start to see a rapid pace of change in 5 or 10 years? Is it going to take longer than that? What do you think?
I think you're going to see pockets of change that move a lot faster than that, but I think right now what we really need to be focused on is adding value at the point of need, and focusing on that. And then over time, what we'll be able to do is bring together more cohesive networks and more cohesive thinking to do a much broader approach. Right now, especially in the U.S., we know that cities are looking at issues where funding and mechanisms for revenue and taxation and tax base and the aging population of the country and all the things that are going on. Just being at this particular trade show this week, you hear that over and over again, what our city managers and public officials are facing in that area. So right now, a lot of it is still very focused on cost needs. But over time, we see that that's going to transition somewhat to be a little bit less about cost and a little bit more about adding the value of the long term. And what's been really exciting is there have been a couple of cities that we've seen this week doing some remarkable things as they're thinking about things now more holistically than they have been in the last few years. So we're starting to see that level of thinking. Well, let's say we have the water department and the public utility, as well as the transportation group and the people managing our sewer and wastewater, bringing those people together and saying, okay, how do we work together to have a more cohesive plan so that we don't replicate each other's work, because they're having to look at that, and that starts with understanding your cost curve, but at the same time it definitely helps companies like us, because now we can start talking about pulling those things together, which is what we're expert at.
It's a very interesting time to observe. So instead of making top-down functional changes, we're seeing cities begin to change and become less siloed because of the possibilities and opportunities that can be derived from data, from monitoring data and capability. So yeah, you've really pointed that out. So Ken Durand, thank you so much. Ken's from the Atlanta Idea Factory with Ericsson, and I've really enjoyed talking to you today.
That's great, Carol. Thank you for having me.